My name is Archie McIntyre, and I'm the executive director here at Wright-Locke. And it's great to have everyone come out on a kind of a questionable evening with the weather, but we'll be nice and dry in here in the 1827 barn. So many familiar faces here. Thank you for coming and support us. But I see some new faces. Who in the crowd this is our first visit to Wright-Locke Farm? There's 1, 2, 3, great. 4, 5, 6, 7, excellent. So Wright-Locke's farm is a local community farm here in Winchester, and our mission is to build a broad community through sustainable agriculture, active learning, land stewardship, and an appreciation of our historic New England farm. And we do that by a variety of things. We grow certified organic crops that we sell to our local community through CSA and farm stands and in our farmers markets. We also do farm-based education for both kids and adults. This is part of our educational offering. We have our speaker series 5 nights a summer. And then we have events, either public or private. If you're here on a Thursday night in the summertime, you would be part of a huge crowd that comes to our family farm nights, where we have a free concert and people bring picnics and generally get to visit and be on an open, beautiful farm. Wright-Locke is Winchester's last farm, and as such, our community values it as a cherished resource. So we're always trying to do new things and explore new ways to have impact, and that's the genesis of the speaker series. This is our 2nd year. Jen is our 3rd speaker this summer, and we hope to continue to bring new ideas to the Winchester community, generally around the things that we hold very dear and important to us. So if you in the audience have any good ideas about what we should be doing here that we're not, I would encourage you to find one of us to suggest an idea. That's kind of how we have grown over the years. Members of our community come to us with good ideas, sometimes not so good ideas, but the good ideas percolate to the top and get implemented. The bad ideas get appreciated, but kind of pushed to the side gently, and that's that's put it on the compost. Yep, that's how we kind of do things here. So I'll stop talking because I could talk for a long time, but that would be boring for you. But I would like to introduce Kim Nealand. Kim is our community engagement manager, and now our development associate, helping with a fundraising plan that we're working on for our new education center up on the hillside. And Kim will introduce Jen.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Archie. So while I won't talk about the new education center, but listen for it coming up. There'll be more information on it because it's really exciting stuff. But I just wanted to welcome you all again to the farm. It's just been such a pleasure to coordinate the speaker series over the last 2 years, and it's just been amazing to see, the different topics and the different the wonderful speakers that we've been able to get, and they've been doing this, just the kindness of their hearts, and they want to, share all the knowledge that they have, and we've been really appreciative of that. Without further ado, I'm going to read a long list of amazing things about this one. We'll keep it. I'll try to keep it short, but just to give you guys a good idea of where Jen is coming from. She is a leader in local food systems, work focusing on beginner farmer development. So she's been the director of the New Entry Sustainable Farming Project since 2006, and then you were coordinator for another 5 years before that. So
it's my 17th year.
Yeah, that's great. Congratulations.
Thanks.
She's also an agricultural science and policy lab instructor at the Tufts Friedman School, where she helps to bridge the gap between graduate students' classroom learning and practical farm-based education. And then along with New Entry and Tufts, Jennifer has also extensive experience on the ground with her own market garden, as well as diversified pasture-based livestock operations. She operates with her husband, Pete, called Pete and Jen's Backyard Birds, which you might have heard about. and they recently transitioned over to Codman Community Farm. She also serves on the board of the Carrot Project and board of the Urban Farming Institute of Boston. Those are still current. Awesome. And then earlier in her career, she also, sorry, I got a fold right here. There's just too many things. I wouldn't have been able to remember it all. But earlier in career, she also made her own personal strides in the agricultural field in Santa Cruz, California, and even in Honduras with the Peace Corps. She's earned numerous leadership awards for her food systems work. Was selected as an Environmental Leadership Fellow and an Eisenhower Agricultural Fellow. She holds a master's degree in public policy with a focus on agricultural policy from Tufts University, a certificate in management of community organizations from Tufts as well, certificate in ecological horticulture from UC Santa Cruz, and a BS in environmental science and public policy from Indiana University. So tonight, we're so pleased to have Jennifer with us, and I hope you're all as excited as I am to hear what she has to say. So join me in welcoming her to the barn stage.
Thank you. Well, thank you for that great introduction, and thank you for inviting me here tonight. This is an amazing space and an amazing place and community, and I'm really grateful for the leadership of the board and Archie and everyone. I'm sure many of you are probably volunteers here at the farm who've made this place what it is. And it's near and dear to my heart that communities preserve places like this that I think are so important to share with the next generation what we want, what I have spent my career doing, which is trying to get people really excited about farming and agriculture, because I care a lot about what I eat and what my child eats and my family members and people that I love eat. And we share a lot of community and celebration around food. And I think we've become really divorced from how food is grown and how it's raised and all of those things. So I want to make sure that we have a future generation of people that know how to grow food in a sustainable, ecological, fair, and just way. So that's what I do, and that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. So thank you for all being part of this space as well. So I wanted to just clarify what I consider sustainable to mean, because I think sometimes now in the work in the world out there, sustainable gets greenwashed a little bit and can mean a lot of different things. A lot of companies are using that term for marketing purposes. So what I think about sustainability and sustainable agriculture in particular, it means that we'll be able to sustain food security and community resilience, public health, nutritional quality of our food, economic development, ecological sustainability. And the piece that I care a lot about is who are those actors in that system and how are they treated and valued along the way. And I think the foundation of our food system is the farmer. They're the person that wakes up every day and has to keep all of those things in balance throughout the whole value chain, bringing food from field to plate. So I don't know about you, but I like to eat, and I often find myself thinking about who grew that food, where it's traveled from, how it was raised, and what the impact was along the way. So I'm going to start out and state the obvious. We all eat, right? We all eat food. I mean, hopefully some of you enjoyed the nice meal we had from Clover, so thank you for that. And we all eat the food. Lots of different kinds of food comes from all over the place in this country, and it comes from farms and the seas, so I don't want to forget our fishermen, and it's grown by farmers and ranchers and fishermen. So if there's food all over the place, we all have an abundance of food, there must be farmers everywhere because there's food everywhere. But that's not really the whole story. So where are these farmers? How many of you here are farmers?
I'm a volunteer.
All right, great. Thank you. Yay. Yay, farmers. And how many people know of a family member within their immediate or second generation family that has been a farmer? Okay, a few more hands. Great. Third or fourth or fifth generation?
Everybody.
Everybody must know that, right? So if you're like most Americans, most people don't know a farmer today unless they're involved in a community farm like this, which is great. But we all eat, we all have food in our homes, we share meals together, and that food is growing somewhere. So right now the US consumer is about 3 generations removed from having anyone in their family farming, and approximately only 2% of Americans live on farms, and less than 1% claim farming as their prime occupation. So not that many people compared to how many eaters there are. So yes, we've become very efficient in how we raise food in this country. So we're producing more food than ever with less people for a lot of reasons. But really over the last 50 years, America's farms and farmers have been declining and disappearing. And farmers have steadily been aging. So since 1950, US has lost 60% of its farms, which adds up to over 3.2 million farms, and 240 million acres of farmland are gone, vanished, not to probably come back. So where did all these people go who used to grow food on these farms? They're retiring, selling their land. Their next generation is not interested in farming. They're just kind of gone. So that's what's been happening. And with that goes a lot of the knowledge about food production and how we care for the land and the soil. So how did we get here? I'm going to take us on a very, hopefully, short history lesson. So I like how Dr. Sagan here says you have to understand the past to understand the present. So in order to understand how we got less than 1% of our people growing food, we're going to look through the system. So this is a nice nourishlife.org publishes this food systems map and just kind of illustrates the complexity of our food system. It's very dynamic, all these interrelated biological, production, distribution, consumption, functions that with interrelated biological, economic, political, and social interrelationships in the food system. So there's a lot going on in here. And the political system that kind of surrounds all of this has had a huge influence on how we farm and the ways that we farm today. And under our new leadership, food hasn't really been on the political menu. In the last presidential election, food was never mentioned. Food and farm policy really was not in the discourse between many of the candidates. And farm policy right now, we're at the place where we're up for renegotiating the 2018 Farm Bill, which happens every 5 years. And even that has been, in gridlock, and we don't know if it's going to move forward this week or next week or anytime. There's a lot going on to think about, the other things on our plates that are related to agriculture, like the trade wars and immigration, and things that get discussed in the Farm Bill are things like cutting the nutrition title and SNAP benefits, food stamps, rolling back environmental protections, slashing conservation programs, other things. So we're just really trying hard to fight for good quality farm policies at this point. So the piece that I'm going to talk about in this system, again, it's a big, vast system, a lot going on, but the farmer piece is what I'm going to be focused on. So how did we get here? Back in the day, taking a step back in time, in the early 1800s, 95% of Americans were farming or involved in ag and food production. And by the mid-1800s, around 1862, President Abraham Lincoln established the U.S. Department of Agriculture. And early government programs were really designed to support agriculture. So the Morrill Land Grant Act, which created ag research colleges to help disseminate knowledge and information about farming to farmers. The Homestead Act of 1862, which expanded farmland ownership at no cost, called a homestead. And we won't go into the fact that there were already other people here farming that land. That's a whole other discussion about taking indigenous lands and all of that, but we won't go there now. But usually people were encouraged to take up these 160 acres of undeveloped federal land west of the Mississippi River, and other land expansion acts were passed, which also made land available for dry land farming and ranching. And so this expansion and overproduction of land was creating a little bit of challenges. And then I'll jump a little bit. This is hard to figure out exactly how to put in order, but other policy inventions around World War I, World War II time, people have heard of the Victory Garden movement, also called war gardens or food gardens for defense, were these vegetable, fruit, and herb gardens planted on private residence, not just in the United States, but in the United Kingdom, Canada, Australia, Germany, other countries around the world, were used along with these rationing stamps and cards to put pressure on the public, to reduce pressure on the public food supply. And so these efforts helped aid the war effort, and they were also considered a civil and morale booster. So that was great. I feel like we could bring that back right now, which would be awesome. So people were feeling like they were contributing their labor, they were rewarded by what they were growing, they were contributing to a larger movement. And it made growing food part of our daily lives, which we've gotten away from. So this campaign resulted in over 5 million gardens in the US and foodstuff production exceeding $1.2 billion by the end of the war, which was a lot in that day. So onward, as this expansion was happening, we're increasing productivity on the farms, we're expanding and colonizing the rest of the country, we're producing more than ever, and then we had this period of great overproduction, followed by the Great Depression, which caused the farm crisis in the 1930s, and then was quickly followed by the Dust Bowl, and then we had this period of major ecological and agricultural damage to prairie lands and severe drought, coupled with these decades of extensive farming practices without good quality land management, like cover cropping and fallowing fields and crop rotation and prevention of wind erosion and things like that. So to solve a lot of this, we started creating policy, the New Deal reforms, and then Secretary of Ag Henry Wallace came in and implemented the first Agricultural Adjustment Act, which was kind of our first major piece of federal legislation that began to control supply and grain prices by paying farmers these subsidies not to plant their fields and to depopulate their livestock herds. So we actually had a period of time where people were paid to depopulate their herds, which is kind of interesting. I think animal rights activists would have a hard time with that right now. And they also established some great conservation programs. The Soil Conservation Service started and all of that. And despite these challenging years in farming, still 1 in 4 Americans were farming at that time. So we still had a quarter of our population involved in ag. And then we had this great kind of many decades of the Green Revolution. You've probably all heard of that term. It was a series of research and development and new technology initiatives that were basically occurring between the 40s and the late 70s that increased production around the world. Most of it became in the 1960s. Things like high-yielding cereal grains, expansion of irrigation infrastructure, modernization of management techniques, hybridized seeds, synthetic pesticides and fertilizers. And as a result, these crop yields just started booming exponentially. So this mechanization and industrialization led to continued grain increases and things like that. And so surpluses happened, as it naturally would. So then, even when land was taken out of production, even if we were farming less acres, we were still producing more food. So we saw an increase in farm size, consolidation began to happen, and then in 1970, this guy, you've all heard the name Earl Butz, probably became the Secretary of Agriculture, and he wanted to solve this overproduction and surplus problem, so he was shipping grain overseas, developing these export markets, and basically encouraging farmers to plant fence row to fence row, and the famous phrase, get big or get out. So in that period of time, we see this rapid decline in the number of farmers and the increasing significant average size of the farm. So farmers took out their conservation infrastructure that they just put in, a few decades earlier. They took out their terraces, their wetland buffers, their shelter belts, all these things. They bought out their smaller farming neighbors and who couldn't really expand quickly enough. Then we enter the 1980s until today. Now we are in the many decades of big ag. So this is our reality. We have all these large grain handlers that came onto the scene. They started sending lobbyists to the Capitol and putting forth, basically writing the Farm Bill for their own benefit. Ronald Reagan certainly supported deregulation and moved away from the antitrust and trust-busting practices. So, further concentrating the supply chains. Farms were in distress. Farm Aid was formed in this time to help, with their suicide hotline for farmers who were feeling very desperate. In the 1985 Farm Bill invested over $20 billion in programming to boost farm income, but 16% of these farms were already financially stressed. And that year alone, in 1985, 300,000 farmers sold out and left agriculture entirely in 1 year. And many farmers were committing suicide. So these trends in big ag have continued, even today in the dairy sector. I don't know if you've seen those articles out there. Some of the Agrimark dairy cooperatives are now sending out suicide hotline letters to their milk suppliers. And the reason for that, when you think about it, when you're a farmer and your livelihood, many generations have been stewarding this land, it's wrapped up in your own personal identity, you're in deep debt and you don't see any way out of it, people just, it is what it is. It's really sad and depressing and yeah, awful. Sorry, I don't mean to be the Debbie Downer here tonight. But the challenge really is that these policies that we have, that most people think of the Farm Bill, and it's not something that they feel like applies to them, but it really influences our entire food system and how food is grown and raised. And so that's why I'm bringing all of this up, to just kind of set that context for why we need a program like ours. And as we've had this big ag, we continue to see in all industries these kind of big ag trends and mega deals that are becoming more and more common. It's happening across the organic food sector, chemical and seed companies, meat packing, even the beer industry. This professor from Michigan State does these great infographics where he really shows the consolidation of the food processing sectors. And the thing that gets me is we do have these antitrust regulations on the books to help avoid concentration and consolidation of trade. The Sherman Act of 1890, the Federal Trade Commission Act, the Clayton Act, and the Packers and Stockyard Act, and then the Grain Inspection, Packard and Stockyard Administration in 1921, or GIPSA. And President Obama was doing listening sessions when he first took office to try to continue to enforce that, and then it ended up getting pushed by the wayside, unfortunately. So these big lobby groups really have a lot of control over how food is produced. So we've seen, I did want to say that I think that consumers have a huge voice in countering these trends by choosing what food purchases you support, and we'll talk about that a little more later. But so you can kind of see all of this playing out on this graph, the trends of farms over that period of time and what's been happening. Number of farms, slowly declining in the 50s, and farms are just getting larger. And this has resulted in a significant decline of beginning farmers. I mean, who wants to get into this industry, or who can afford to get into this industry if the only option you have is to compete in this globalizing market at a large scale with a lot of capital investment? So today, to make a profit and access this larger consumer market, farming is hugely capital intensive. The price of land is cost prohibitive for many new farmers. They're huge farms, a lot of development pressures. We know that in Massachusetts really well. Mechanization and industrialization have increased and really helped keep the price of food low. When you think about the economies of scale that these large corporations can garner, it's really tough to compete at a localized level with $15 an hour wage labor and expensive cost of living and land prices being what they are. So rural areas, generally, as we're seeing across the political landscape, economically depressed, and young people just don't see a way to return home to the farm. But this is starting to change a little bit. There is some hope, so I'm going to get brighter as we go forward. So the good news, it's not all doom and gloom. I think in the last at least decade or so, we've seen a huge increase by consumers, whether it's from food scares, other things, Michael Pollan's book, other things in the popular media about how we really are producing food. People are starting to wake up and pay attention. And so that's driving this huge increase in consumer demand for local food. So, these are a little bit outdated numbers now, but it's the last we have. Local food sales, over 12 billion almost the last few years, up from just 5 billion in 2008. So that's growing, which is great. People are hankering for it. We're seeing we have over 300 farmers markets across Massachusetts, hundreds of CSA programs, lots of now home delivery services, and all kinds of innovations trying to connect people with local food. And places like Wright-Locke Farm is a perfect example, doing farm-based education and starting earlier in the pipeline. There's now farm to preschool programs. So we're getting back to really hopefully wanting to infuse a culture of food values in our communities, which is great. And that's great for us because it means that people are seeing an economic opportunity to stay in farming and to get into farming, which is good news. And it's great when communities can band together and keep land from continuous development pressure, and towns are building in sustainability plans and agricultural master plans into their planning processes as well. So one of the challenges that we have, which is also an opportunity, even though there is this great demand in New England, we're not very self-sufficient. You can imagine we don't grow all of the food that we consume with a good population base here. So we do produce about half our dairy in New England, about a third of our vegetables, although that's a little misleading statistic because most of those are potatoes from Maine, less than 10% of our fruit, and less than 1% of our grains and pulses, and less than 1% of our proteins from animal protein. So if we were to be cut off from this globalized, transoceanic, whatever, globalized food system that we're moving toward, we would not be very self-sufficient in New England. And this, I'm sure, I don't know if you've had speakers come to talk about the 50 by 60 food vision, which is great. So this is a great vision aspirationally that we should be striving to be a little more self-sufficient and look at how we're, looking at land and things like that. So their vision is to have at least 50% of clean, fair, just, and accessible food for all New Englanders by 2060. So I definitely applaud that vision. The other challenge that we have, and also an opportunity, is that New England farmers are aging pretty quickly. So if we're going to do something about this and meet this great demand that we have and try to strive for this vision, we need younger folks getting into this work. So American Farmland Trust and Land for Good did this study a couple of years ago, which was really helpful. And they did a deep dive into the agricultural statistics of the aging farmer population and looked and found that the average age of farmers in New England, older than 65, they own more than 30% of the land. And 92% of those farmers over the age of 65 don't have anyone younger than 45 years of age working with them. So there isn't necessarily a younger successor in line for some of these aging farmers. So what's going to happen to this 1.4 million acres of land that they control in the next 20 years as they age out, and the people that they may have a younger son or daughter who's older than that 45 age may or may not take that over. So us achieving this vision and reaching our local food demand, we need a lot of new and beginning farmers. So that's kind of our case for support. Here's some other look at how that breaks down in the different age brackets of the different farm operators from the last census data that we had. We'll be able to update these numbers. The 2017 census was just issued last year, and it'll be a year or so before that data comes out, and we'll see if this trend is changing in any way or getting worse and even older. So great. So what can we do about it? So what does all this mean for how we're going to feed ourselves in the future and steward this land? So I love this bumper sticker, no farms, no food, but you don't have farms without farmers. Sometimes I think, again, people in the land conservation world too, we're also trying to really help the land trust community understand that preserving land is great, but preserving land that grows food is even better. I mean, there's lots of values of land, but for farms, a lot of the land trusts could also be encouraging some of their land to be used for agriculture, and that gets tricky because if there's no farmer to farm it, then it's kind of a double-edged sword in that way. So, what are we going to do about all this? So, Thomas Jefferson said, "I like the dreams of the future better than the history of the past." So, me too. That was all very depressing. So let's talk about what we're trying to do to make sure that we have trained, educated farmers moving forward. And believe me, there are people that want to farm. So New Entry Sustainable Farming Project, as we said, we are working very hard to grow the next generation of New England farmers so that we have this resilient regional food system. So people want to farm. How do we help them make that happen? How do we help somebody that walks in our door someday, wakes up, they're having a midlife crisis or disgruntled with their corporate job and say, I want to be a farm, or they're coming out of college wanting to farm and they aren't inheriting family land, or they don't have a trust fund in their pocket. Like, how do we help folks get into this business given all these challenges? So our mission is really to provide this training to help farmers produce culturally appropriate, nutritious food accessible to everyone. And we want to be able to provide career development and economic opportunity. So we approach this as a business opportunity, and we're trying to create agripreneurs in a way, and to look at it like that. A lot of people come to us with a starry-eyed romantic notion of cultivating, skipping down with their bare feet in the rows and, harvesting the beautiful bouquets of flowers, and isn't it wonderful? And the reality is it's just a lot of hard work and a lot of management. Today we talk a lot to our farmers that you can be a great grower, but if you're not a good manager and a business manager, then forget it. You can go have your nice backyard hobby, and that's a great way to grow food and contribute to something, but being a farmer today means being a really good manager of a lot of things. So our goal is to increase by 15% the number of economically viable, environmentally sustainable, resilient farmers, small and scalable, in the next 5 years or so, and then beyond that. So we work with a very diverse group of farmers, anyone and everyone basically who wants to farm. And this is one of my favorite cartoons. I've been using this for my entire career. This is one of the reasons I'm so passionate about ag, because there's just so much to know and do. Like I said, being a manager, but you have to figure out how to deal with all the policy issues that we just talked about that are working against you, all these competing pressures and all the skills and knowledge that you have to manage all these complex systems swirling around you at all times is a lot. I mean, you've got to be a good business person, manage labor, all the crop production and pest and climate change issues and marketing stuff and social media and, just everything, homemaker, all these things. And now we're adding in farming and ag, all these technology advances, artificial intelligence, robotics, big data. How can you use that to, improve your practices, drones, the whole 9 yards. So the opportunities for learning are endless. So the good thing about understanding the scope and the breadth of what new farmers need to know is that you just need to have a really good team to help you do it all, because you're not going to know everything. But most farmers that people know from generations ago, just like we're just this wealth of knowledge and knew so much about everything, and that's becoming more and more rare as we're losing that. So we're trying to build this pipeline of farmers. And so who are these people? Like I said, young people, immigrants, refugees, career changers, retirees, unemployed, veterans, you name it. Lots of people walk in our door. And they need all these things. They need to know the business savvy. They need to know how to grow the food, how to grow it in New England with all the changing dynamics, how are they going to sell it first and foremost. What are the market dynamics that are out there? Who can they sell to? We get a lot of people that walk in the door think they're going to sell to Market Basket on a quarter acre. Probably not going to happen at first, maybe eventually. And then where are they going to do that? What kind of land are they going to get access to? And how much is that going to cost? And what kind of equipment and capital and dollars do they need? And all that good stuff. Where are they going to find the labor? And how do they put all these pieces together? And then the other big thing that we've just learned over the years is people really need this bigger, broader community of support. So farming can be a very lonely job if you're out there on the landscape by yourself or with your small crew doing the same, sometimes repetitive tasks day after day. So having that built-in community of other farmers and technical assistance providers and other folks that are rooting you on, customers that give you positive feedback, all those things are super important. And then we provide ongoing technical assistance so that folks really understand that they're supported. So this is sort of our pathway to a career in farming. Basically, people have to wake up and decide that they want to farm. So that's step number one. Some people aren't quite sure. So our Explore Farming program is a way to introduce people to the concept of what is commercial farming, what does our program have to offer, what does it really mean. And then if folks are not totally disillusioned by that, then they can come to our business planning course. And then we run folks through a 10-week farm business planning program where we help them write a business plan and do market analysis and startup budgets, cash flow, risk management plan, food safety plan, all that good stuff, and get real about these are the things, a nutrient management plan now with all the state nutrient management regulations. So help them put it all together into a comprehensive roadmap for their startup period. And then we offer land on our incubator farm space. So we have 3 different farm properties right now that we currently lease, 2 from a land trust and 1 from a private entity. And we give people land with all the infrastructure already ready to go to start their business. So you've heard about incubator kitchens or tech incubators. We're a farm incubator. So people can rent and lease land from us and implement their business plan, grow their crops, market their crops, sell them, try out the business, figure out what they like to grow, what they're good at, what their challenges are. We're there to provide support and assistance. We do field-based trainings throughout the season, and we're providing what we call case management, helping them think about, well, beyond this incubator, which you only have access to for 3 seasons, which should be enough 3 years to give you enough diversity of every year is different on the farm to figure it out, and then we want to help you transition off onto your own land because we have new people coming in every year. So we start saying, well, what's your next step? You better start looking for land. It's not easy to find land. And we've had a land matching program in the past, which has helped canvass sort of the geographic communities around Greater Boston, looking for those small parcels of open space that we can match people to, helping them connect with microloans or other capital that they may need. We run a food hub. So we have a 2,000 square foot warehouse facility in Lowell. It used to be called World Peas. Now it's just called the New Entry Food Hub because we found that World Peas was taking on a life of its own and nobody connected it back to New Entry. So we're just calling it New Entry Food Hub from now on. But we want to be able to use the food hub as a market-based training tool for beginning farmers. So a lot of farmers come in and they get on the incubator, they want to grow 40 different varieties of crops. They're selling at the farmer's market. They might want to start a small CSA program. And the reality is right now the market is tightening a lot in the CSA community and things like that. And so we want to be training people for wholesale. And the Food Hub has always been sort of a forgiving wholesale market for our beginning farmers. So we act like, we're the buyer. We can help them with invoicing, crop quality, how many bunches of kale to a box is standard in the industry. And then we aggregate from all of our 30 plus farmers that continue to supply the Food Hub and other partners. We run a community supported agriculture program. We do some other wholesale to institutions like the Tufts Dining Service. And then we do food access work. So we feel like we're a nonprofit. We're collecting food. We can also partner with other entities. We do a lot of senior partnering. So we work with senior centers like Leahy Clinic sets up free farmers markets for seniors in their clinics as part of their nutrition program, and we supply the vegetables for that. So want to make sure that their food is going into different market channels accessible to everyone, but it's also a good training tool for the farmers. And then the goal is to help them move on to their farms in the area and continue farming. So that's kind of our model and what we do. And what we found that really works is trying to build these strong intergenerational, if possible, farmer-to-farmer networks. So farmers love learning from other farmers. They can learn from our staff, but getting farmers together, even on an incubator, there's some kind of like synergy and magic that ends up happening between people that are sharing space, running their own businesses with shared space. Sometimes they're not so great synergy, but more often it's positive than not. People learning different, how do you stake the tomatoes? And like, oh, what are you growing over here? Gee, where are you selling that? How much are you getting for that? And there's a lot of information sharing that's happening there. And then here in Eastern Massachusetts, we have this great network called CRAFT, the Collaborative Regional Alliance for Farmer Training. So farmers can get together and visit each other's farms and share strategies and socialize and reduce that feeling of isolation. And then really the other thing that works is constantly encouraging farmers to come in and have us look at their business plans, have us help them think through strategic marketing support. How can we connect them to other resources to help them grow their businesses over time? So continuing to think about this long-term economic viability. And it's not just the economic piece, but also the social piece. So we're starting to realize more and more that farmers need to pay as much attention to the three legs of the sustainability stool: economic, environmental, and social. The social piece is really important. Like, how are people taking care of themselves? A lot of people are farming and having another job. So how do you balance all of these different competing pressures of family, community, and self? And then again, the incubator model we find really works for people to start their operations. And not everyone succeeds. People come onto our incubator program, they might stay a year, they might stay 2 years, and maybe then they'll find other land early, but maybe they'll just decide, you know what, this is not for me. I am not cut out to be a farmer. This isn't working financially. Don't have what it takes to continue to put my head down and make this work. And so I'm going to exit gracefully. And we feel like that is also a success to some degree. So someone did not go out and mortgage a property and invest $50,000 in infrastructure and equipment and then fail and feel miserable and lose their shirt. So they can decide that this is not right for them and hopefully become a better informed food advocate in the world after trying it. So it's that safe space to succeed or to fail. So here are just some of our results. We've trained a lot of farmers over this is our 20th anniversary this year, which we're excited about. We're having a farm-to-table dinner up at our incubator site in Drake on September 15th, if any of you want to come and help celebrate our 20th anniversary with us. A lot of business plans have been created, a lot of land matches in the area, and we've moved a lot of food through our food hub over time. And we've also gotten a lot of recognition. We were one of the early adopters of this kind of work across the country. So we have started a couple of national networks. We now run the National Incubator Farm Training Initiative. There are over 200 incubator farm programs across the country. This is the map. So we run a free technical assistance network. So anyone who wants to learn about the kind of comprehensive programming we offer for beginning farmers, we have toolkits, resource guides, we do webinar series, we do a national conference. Our 7th annual national conference will be held in Colorado this year. And then in the last year and a half, we started our national apprenticeship learning network, because even though we run an incubator program, we've recognized that our most successful incubator farmers have already worked on other farms. So they're not just kind of walking off the street and we have to teach them everything from scratch. The incubator space is not really designed to teach you how to farm. It's the platform on which to farm, but you really need to have some skills to get your quarter-acre plot and be like, oh gosh, that's a big piece of land that I have to keep weeded and keep planted and do things on. So if people really have just gardened or never farmed before, it's a big transition for them. So we started this year a crop production course, which is a new stone in our pathway. So we're teaching hands-on skills to people that have full-time jobs so they can get some of that experience that, folks that can't quit their day jobs and go off and apprentice on a farm for a season. And as part of that, the National Apprenticeship Learning Network is really to try to elevate the quality of apprenticeship programming across the country. So if you didn't grow up on a farm, the next best way to learn to farm is to work on a farm. And most people do that through apprenticeships or internships. The challenge with that in agriculture is there really is no defined pathway for what that looks like to offer an apprenticeship. Any farmer can hang up a shingle and say, I'm going to hire some apprentices. And that can mean a lot of different things. It can mean, paying somebody $100 a week to be weeding for 40 hours a week. It can mean actually offering them structured education and training and opportunities for learning off the farm and be really robust in terms of really passing on the knowledge and anything in between. So we've created this other national network to try to elevate that, to make sure that people are complying with Department of Labor standards, that people could formally register an agricultural apprenticeship program, and that if people are not quite ready to register, at least they have a foundation to improve their educational offerings. And we hope that will also help elevate the sector. So some of the things that we found over the years that are successful characteristics or characteristics of successful farmers and ranchers are people having a really strong vision and passion for this work. I mean, that's got to be first and foremost. You've just got to want to do it and love it. We love it when people have this holistic systems approach to understand how they're part of the industry and look at the whole that they're managing. Having great technical skills is always helpful, having entrepreneurial skills. And sometimes that's something that's really hard to teach. If somebody's not naturally entrepreneurial and able to see opportunity where opportunity isn't spelled out for you, that can be challenging. So that's really a successful characteristic. And then having really astute business and marketing savvy is also a key to success. And then this personal resilience and adaptability, because farming is always changing and adapting, and you just never know what's going to be thrown at you from day to day. And then in order to sustain, if we get all these people excited, we get them well trained, we give them these experiences, and we get them out there in the world, which is our goal, then that learning, like I said, all the skills that you need to know never goes away. So we have to also, to be successful, continue to support their efforts over time. So helping them connect to this landscape of service providers that are out there. If you're not ready at this stage of your business development to talk to so-and-so, you might be ready in another year or 5 years or 10 years, and as your business is evolving. Farmers that get access to land, even as their business matures, they may need more land or different types of land. And so ongoing land access is something that we continue to work with our farmers on, even after they're established. And most people are leasing land. Sometimes those leases come and go or are ephemeral, and it's just a constant process. And then ongoing production support, learning new methodology, always looking at your books, and all of that. And this continual market development piece is huge. And as I mentioned, the peer support is an ongoing thing that we try to foster as well. So our future goals for new entry, we are really hoping, we've been looking for a long time to centralize our operations on one site. So we have our food hub in one location, our office in another, and these 3 different sites, and we want to be co-located on one property, which will be super exciting, and looking at building more, strengthening more regional partnerships across New England. If we're going to achieve this food vision, each of our states in New England, almost all of them have state food policy plans that all have something to do with next generation farming and making sure we're bringing new people into agriculture, but they're not connected right now. So thinking about trying to make sure that we work across the region successfully and share policies and strategies, not just statewide, but regionally. And then thinking about if we can do this really well regionally and build this amazing ecosystem of support around all these things in New England, then we can also be poising and positioning ourselves to help other regions across the country also look at how their food system and interconnections among the supply chain can be strengthened. So those are our goals. And so what can all of you guys do to help create this home for future farmers? So probably already doing it since you're here and connected to Wright-Locke, but supporting local farmers and producers, eating locally, plant a garden, keeping that kind of victory garden spirit alive, keeping your fingers in food production so you can really appreciate those who do grow food, and be an advocate for change. I give this whole policy primer because it is so important, and it's something that I think more of us as eaters and consumers need to be paying attention to. This stuff really matters that gets decided in DC, and these policies and programs, and your representatives and senators and congressional folks, they want to hear that this is important to you, and they should be paying attention to certain provisions in the Farm Bill. There's a lot of different groups that work on that exclusively. New Entry does not do policy and advocacy work exclusively, but there are lots of other groups we can help you connect with that you can get on their action alerts. And then keeping farmland open where you can. It's amazing that you guys were able to protect this space. Hopefully other communities can do the same. Supporting our programming, volunteering, all that good stuff. And then another simple thing you can do, and I have some postcards. I would not be a good ED if I did not try to give you an actionable item, but New Entry is sponsoring this Choose Fresh and Local license plate, which will help fund our Beginning Farmer Network across the state, which is an aggregation of service providers that are working to provide training for beginning farmers, and also supports the Federation of Massachusetts Farmers Markets. So love it if you put this on your car. It's not only just helping us, it's $40 every 2 years on top of your license, your registration fees, but it also just helps promote awareness among the general populace that food and farming and fresh and local is something that you value, and it's a great conversation starter. So if you want to get one of these, you can order online and it comes right to your door. You do not have to wait at the registry. So I know how much of a pain in the neck that is. So that's what I had, and I'd love to open up for questions and conversation.
Yeah. Just before we jump into questions, I just want to make sure that we thank you, because I know some people probably have to run before we're all finished up.
Jen, you had a slide in the beginning where you said we need 10,000 new farmers. Is that in New England? Mm-hmm. Wow. How are we going to do that?
I know. We were like, okay, how can we say we want to create 10? Like, that's just not going to happen. I mean, Tom Vilsack, a few years ago under the Obama administration, created a whole kind of grouping of the programs around beginning farmer issues. And he said we need 100,000 new farmers in the United States in the next couple decades. So this was our ability to drill down just in New England. But if we're going to, there's going to be a massive transfer of land in this country as these aging farmers retire without successors. And so the real question is, who is this land going to go to? I mean, if young people can't buy out their older generation, which, as a farmer, you're land rich and cash poor, right? You've invested your entire life savings and earnings, and your value is your property and your assets and your equipment and your business. It's hard for a young son or daughter with estate taxes and all the other things to buy out their parents. And so if they can't afford to do that, even if they want to, which is also a big challenge that people are talking about, then what happens is they just sell out to the big corporations that can afford to swallow them up. And then the acreage gets bigger and bigger, the machinery gets bigger and bigger, and that's what we're seeing happen. So,
are there other groups like yours that are training young farmers in New England?
Yeah, there are different groups. There are some extension programs in other states. Unfortunately, our land grant does not have a lot of resources in Massachusetts. They have some programming, but very little. There are other extension programs that are doing beginning farmer education. There are other groups, the Maine Organic and Farming Gardening Association, the NOFAs. They have both, the home scale gardener programs, but also, sustainable farming training programs and conferences and things like that. Land for Good, as I mentioned before, they're really working on the succession planning with elder farmers and trying to help them think through estate planning and tax implications and legal stuff and all of that. And they also have a New England Farm Link, or New England Land, or sorry, what is it called? So it's kind of an aggregation of we used to manage their website for them, but the New England Farmland Finder, sorry, that's what we named it. And so you can, anybody can post their properties online, and they kind of it's just a clearinghouse for land opportunities for farmers to find. There's a lot of groups doing it. The map of all the incubator programs across the country. National Young Farmer Coalition is a national scale organization doing grassroots organizing across the country to get young farmers active and engaged, and doing trips to DC and having them talk in Congress and trying to pass Farming as a Public Service Act to get student loan forgiveness for young farmers who want to get into farming and are crippled with student loan debt and can't, then aren't eligible for Farm Service Agency loans and things like that. They were instrumental in helping get the Farm Service Agency to develop a microloan program. So it used to be, Farm Service Agency federally subsidized loans for farmers where, you had to have 3 years of demonstrated Schedule F tax filings and, production history and management experience. And as a young farmer in your first few years, you don't have that. So creating the microloan program, now you can get up to $50,000 of government funding to start your farm. There's some good stuff happening, not enough of it. And just as an example, the USDA has a grant program called the Beginning Farmer Rancher Development Grant. It has $18 million in it for the whole country. That's peanuts, it's like, okay, how much can you do with $18 million of federal money across 50 states to train beginning farmers? Like, that's a token, it's something, but those are the kind of things that we could get more funding for in the Farm Bill to do more of this work. All that stuff. And dairying is a whole other thing that I didn't even really talk about. We don't teach dairying at New Entry because we're not equipped to do that on our incubator farms. We have done I didn't talk about our livestock programming, but we partner with the Tufts Vet School in Grafton because they have a whole working campus and they're designed to teach veterinary students about animal care. So we've done a bunch of livestock education programming for that.
Jen, Wright-Locke was the beneficiary of a huge upswing in people's interest in local farming. And I know you are too, you have a history with it. Do you know where that came from? Or why it happened now or more recently?
I'm just guessing. I don't have data or facts necessarily, but I think a lot of it did start from the food scares that, when people realized that people were dying from E. coli on cantaloupe and spinach and, the Jack in the Box scare and ground beef and other things. And then these documentary films started coming out and exposing the realities. When you see it on films and interview people and it's in the public media and people doing articles and all of that, I think that the pendulum started to swing the other way and people were caring more about it. And I don't know. I don't know if that's really what it was, but it seemed like those were the things that were swirling at the time. When New Entry started in 1998, and I came back from the Peace Corps and did the UC Santa Cruz program and was in California in 2001, nobody was talking about local food. We were going and, as part of our visit there, visiting these like larger scale but still sustainable commercial farmers in California, and everybody was like, oh, ag is dying, don't go into agriculture. And I was like, geez, I just signed up for this program and like all these farmers are telling me not to go into this business. And so I came here and we were helping, immigrants and refugees start farming because nobody else was looking to farm. And these were folks that had farming backgrounds from other countries. They knew how to grow and they just needed some support. And then all of a sudden in like 2007, like all of these like, mass media features and these issues were happening. And then all of a sudden people were starting to knock on New Entry's door saying, well, we want to farm too. And, are you only for immigrants and refugees? And so we kind of did our own internal planning process and we're like, well, should we be reaching everyone? And then everybody was like, yes, why not? If people want to farm, like help them to farm. And so when we opened our doors, then it was just everybody, we had to offer 2 business planning courses and start a livestock component and, do all these things and really try to move people off the incubator because more people were coming every year. And so the interest grew, the farmers market movement grew, all these things. And I think people really got excited because they also realized that local food actually tastes really good. Mm-hmm. And as we started shipping and breeding, I didn't even go through the whole, like, what have we done in terms of seed breeding and diversity, and soil quality has been declining for decades over that period of time of the Green Revolution. And so the nutrient density and the quality and the variety selection of what we're getting mass produced from agribusiness is not very tasty, right? Yeah. So when people started realizing that their chicken tastes like nothing and you have to add all these artificial flavors and salts and whatever and processed food and all that stuff, I think people, when they come back to growing food in a garden and it tastes really good and trying out the farmer's market, then it just kind of exploded. And when people came to us for our chicken, it was huge. We were there at the right time in the right place, but people were like, wow, this chicken actually tastes like chicken. And it tastes like what I remember chicken used to taste like, 30 years ago or whatever it was. And so when people started introducing the heirloom tomato and we've expanded our cuisine more globally as well, which I think has been interesting to watch over the last 15 years. I mean, my grandmother never knew what cilantro was. And like, cilantro is cilantro. Like, everyone knows what cilantro is right now. Like, no one used to eat avocados, and like, they're all the rage. And so I think we've really diversified what we're eating and looking for new and unique things. And yeah, I think people are coming back to, what's healthy for me and how do I stay healthy? And eating locally and eating good fruits and vegetables is all part of that, for sure.
I wanted to know if you've thought about like the effects of climate. So, we have droughts and rains and erosions and everything going on. So that must be a real threat.
Yeah, it's definitely a challenge. And yeah, climate as well, which is creating new disease patterns and pests and other things that, traditionally farmers, are learning about and struggling to control, especially farmers who are trying to do things organically with limited arsenal of tools and whatnot. And so that's something that we're trying to build into the crop production training, like how do you plan for natural disasters? I mean, like, there's just not much you can do to plan. People are using more covered technology, so hoop houses, which, there's a federal program to do cost share on high tunnels again. So, I mean, we used to grow in New England. If you look back at the history, we had a lot of things grown under glass in New England, and, all that was dismantled over time. But, we're starting to bring back more high tunnel unheated technology so farmers can extend the growing season. You have a little bit more protection from dramatic weather events under cover. But yeah, it's still tough. I mean, when I first moved to New England 17 years ago, almost no farmers had irrigation systems because it rained an inch a week, and that's what you need to grow. And so, I mean, that would be unheard of today not that it's not unheard of. Some people still don't have irrigation on certain fields, but like, you pretty much know you need to have irrigation to grow vegetable crops in New England now and large parts of eastern coast, because we have drought and we have long periods without predictable rain, and then we get too much rain, and then a few years ago, I'm sorry, I'm not remembering the name of the hurricane or whatever in Vermont that just like changed water courses, and like farms that were no longer, and they had a new river going through their farm. I mean, that was pretty serious disaster for folks, and I think we're going to see more of that. Yeah, so we definitely try to, obviously, sustainable, again, means a lot of different things, and, teaching about soil health and helping beginning farmers, start with their foundation of production knowledge with soil health in mind is obviously something that is really important to us. In terms of the policy aspect around that, I think, there's a lot of conservation titles in the Farm Bill that support conservation practices and are, getting at the soil health component as a more defined characteristic in some of those programs, which is good. And I've been hearing talks recently about there have been some proposals in this Farm Bill or future Farm Bills of looking at big data that the government is already collecting, and like how they're collecting. They're collecting it, but they're not sharing that data and analyzing in a way that people can leverage best practices for how these soil health measures and other conservation measures actually improve their productivity over time and their risk mitigation for climate change and other things like that. And so there are proposals now to try to force USDA basically to look at the data that they already have and are collecting and to release it to researchers and others to put forward best practices and or policies or incentives that will help further those soil health measures. So without chemicals, or we have such precision ag right now on a large scale, there's a lot of, when you think of all these seed companies and agribusiness companies that sell their software packages that go on these tractors that come with their seed, their seed, patented seeds and all the fertilizer that they're selling and pesticides and all that stuff these companies are selling to farmers, and they're sitting in their GPS tractors tracking precision ag data. So what are they doing with that data? Are they doing it to sell more product? Are they doing it to figure out how we can reduce those quantities of things and still grow quality food? All those things are questions. And public research that's less and less funded now could try to use that for the benefit, to reduce the reliance on those kind of things, to figure out like what are the minimum quantities of those technologies that could be used and get the same result. So those are things I think we need to start exploring.
A farm is a farm, even though you would prefer working on an organic farm. I just wondered, if you approach farmers, big generational farmers like in the North Shore?
Yeah, that's a great question. We do get that question a lot, and the challenge has been that we're really trying to bring new people into the industry in a way that helps them move forward as a career pathway. And there are a lot of exit ramps on that career pathway. So becoming your own commercial farmer is one goal. Becoming a farm manager or some other kind of employee on a farm and contributing to food production is also other goals. We've been so focused on trying to just get people excited and get the skills and the knowledge that working with a whole existing generation of farmers and meeting their needs is like a whole other body of work. So we found that out really clearly through our farmland matching program. So when we wanted to help our beginning farmers find land by approaching existing landowners, land trusts, municipalities, towns, state-owned land, all of that, we had way more land that people were like, yes, I want a farmer, send me a farmer. And we're like, well, we could spend all our time being a broker for people that want a farmer versus trying to get people the skills and knowledge that they need to actually, we want to build that pipeline so that we have enough people to connect with all the existing farmers and to help them see a future to transition that land to. So it's kind of like working at two ends of the spectrum, and we try to do a lot, but we can't do everything. And so I think groups like on the North Shore in particular, like the Essex County Greenbelt and the trustees and others are kind of the land bank entities. And then I think a lot of the established farmers are connected with either Farm Bureau or, the extension agencies or the different trade associations that sometimes do programming for farmers that have been in business for a long time. So the short answer is no, but it's not that we don't want to work with those farmers. It's just there's so much work to be done over here and over here that we can't do it all. So we kind of picked one area and then hope that through a lot of other efforts that are larger scale and can work with all those other farmers, that there are other mechanisms and other actors that can take care of their needs. And then we'd love to build that pipeline and send people to good quality farms and get that apprenticeship learning experience. So I think we're just on the precipice of trying to figure out a statewide kind of more formalized apprenticeship program so that we could do that. And it would be a lot of vetting of farms and being like, are you a good educational farm? Do you have what it takes to really mentor and teach people? Because not everybody is good at that. They might be great farmers, but they might be really bad teachers. Or they might be excellent teachers and terrible farmers. Like there's any number of, gradations in between there.
Are there any numbers on, for every X dollars donated to programs like New Entry, one new beginning farmers created?
That's a great question. Trying to estimate that a lot. I would say, oh boy, if we were to value, I would say it's probably $40,000 or $50,000 per farmer for a year. Yeah. I mean, it's not like a one-to-one staff to farmer ratio, but just all the different things that go into the programming and the land management and the marketing support and the training and the ongoing technical assistance that the farmers don't pay for because they're already strapped to try to start their business and invest every spare dollar back into the business. So yeah, we raise a lot of money to support the farmers. Yeah. I know that early on in my career when I started, I heard over and over from a dairy farmer who was also struggling with dairy and was a cheesemaker, and that kept her afloat. And she's like, there's more money paid to help people to help farmers. We should just all give it straight to the farmers and they'd be better off. And sometimes I always wonder, would we just be better off if all the money that was paid to Extension and the credit agencies and all the other people that sit around in policy think tanks and universities thinking about farming, just put all that money in the farmers' pockets? Would we be better off? I don't know. So it's a good question, but yeah.
Okay, so one last one.
One of the vendors, one of the providers that I really appreciate is Mentor Flats.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she's the one that said that. Maria, yes. Yep.
And their produce is displayed so beautifully. The pea shoots can be a bride's bouquet.
Yeah.
Truly.
Yeah.
I imagine there's a fair segment of traditional cultures who are wanting to start food for their own purposes and people and for everybody.
Yeah.
Do you have numerous, I'm wondering what kind of percentage maybe they're appealing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's so early on when New Entry started, I mean, we were exclusively working with immigrants and refugees, and I was hired at the same time Maria Moreira was, and she runs the Flats Mentor Project. So we were all working, and we were working with the Flats Mentor farmers.
Mentor means something.
Right, and so she, being a dairy farmer and cheesemaker herself, she was mentoring these other new Hmong farmers that were coming, and they basically, they were living in the Fitchburg, Leominster area. She's in Lancaster, in the Bolton Flats area, and they came and knocked on her door and said, we are farmers in our home country. You have all this, land. You're growing corn for your cows, and we'd love to farm here. And so she opened up her property and became the Flats Mentor Farm, basically. And I mean, before it was the Mentor Farm, we were part of New Entry, and then we kind of, in 2005, she wanted to create her own nonprofit out of it. And so then New Entry kind of stepped away from the Flats Mentor Farm, and then she's continued to grow and expand her audience to now she's got Africans and Latinos and other folks on that same property there, which is great. And she's been really, again, being a farmer, and she's the one who was like, we pay more to people to help farmers than the farmers, so she's been great about really helping connect those farmers with government programs and getting them high tunnels and irrigation and all kinds of things. So they grow really beautiful produce. And then we worked with the Cambodian farmers in Lowell. So that was kind of our primary immigrant and refugee farming community, because we were there on the original Captain John Oganowski, who was the pilot of Flight 11 that flew into the World Trade Center. So his property was our first incubator farm in the Dracut area. And so he had a strong feeling in his heart for the Cambodian community. He was a fighter pilot in Vietnam and wanted to kind of give back and opened up his land. And so, Lowell has the second largest Cambodian population in the U.S., and that was our recruits there. And then over time, we started attracting more of the African refugees and others that were coming to that area. And then, as I said, in 2007, we kind of opened the doors to everyone. And we still get a lot of diversity, but the American-born population now dwarfs the numbers of immigrants and refugees that we serve, but we still have a strong connection, and many of the farmers that started with the organization back in the early 2000s are still farming, and they still sell to the food hub, and we still help them find land placements every few years when their land leases fall apart, and they come, we still help them order seeds, and we still do translation to help them, deal with landlord issues around water usage, and all those other things. So we're still very connected to that work, and it's challenging work. We have a lot of internal conversations about how do we, spend our precious limited resources as an organization. We can spend a lot of time with our immigrant and refugee farmers, helping them with things that are just part of their lived experience, being challenged, with financial means and language and literacy and culture, and compared to what we could do with folks that have college-educated master's degrees and MBAs and whatever, and we just have to give them a little bit of information and they run with it. And so there's always that tension, and I've been the kind of the stalwart, no, we have to help everyone farm, because everyone who grows food is just as important as the other. So even if it takes more time and energy, who else is going to provide that service? Extension isn't going to do it, the state's not going to do it, so it's our job to make sure that everyone who wants to grow food and do that is cared for. So, yeah.
Great.